Today we're going to talk about bike share, obviously, from urban to regional schemes. Bike shares revolutionized the way we move in cities for millions of people worldwide. And we're going to see how to expand your bike share from the city itself to suburbs and regions. This webinar is organized by the CIE, Cycling Industries Europe, and more specifically by its bike share expert group, which represents the world's leading operators and service providers who work together to shape the sector forward. My name is Mariano Alfonso. I work for a bike share provider and operator, Donkey Republic, and I'm going to moderate today our panel. You have a Q&A and a chat box. Please use the chat box to ask your questions. We're going to have 6 presentations today, and we would like you to ask the questions as we go along. Our colleagues from the CIE are right now sending some messages on the chat where you can also drop your questions, but you can also use the hashtag to talk about this webinar on social media. Do not hesitate to drop your questions, but also your remarks or anything you would like to see in an upcoming webinar of the CIE. As you can see now on your screen, you have the name of the speakers today and also where they're coming from. We try to have a very diverse panel and topics that are quite different, so it can resonate with most of you. We would love to know where you're coming from, so if you can drop in the chat which city or region, country you're coming from, it would be much appreciated. Now we're going to start this webinar with a presentation from Pedro Omen de Gouveia from the Police Network. Pedro, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes? Yep. Well, thank you to CIE for inviting me and Police to share some opening thoughts in this webinar. For those who don't know, Police is the leading network of the European cities and regions advancing transport innovation, not just technological innovation, but innovation that has to do with policies, with methods, with priorities, with tools. And innovations that can make urban mobility become more sustainable and safe and equitable. Obviously, shared micromobility, and bike sharing in particular, is a top priority for us. Not because we like it, we do, but because of its huge strategic importance for advancing sustainable mobility in cities and for helping local and regional authorities deal with one of the biggest problems we have to overcome, which is transport poverty and in particular car dependency. There are 5 thoughts I'd like to briefly share with you, which basically state up what the way we see this issue here at Police. Number 1, what we face is more than a local challenge, is a regional challenge. Transport poverty is not something that you experience at a national level that can be solved with the national government sprinkling some subsidies all around. Transport poverty is a regional issue. It's within the region where you live that you have to access the schools, the health services, the social services, the leisure services, the job opportunities, or if you have it already, the job where you work. So we need to provide the things of sustainable mobility and to shift to sustainable mobility at the regional level, which means that on the one hand, we have to deal with not only the dense urban centers, but above all, with wide suburban, peri-urban, in some cases even rural areas. For those who don't know, the French region where Perez is integrated, Île-de-France, 72% of the territory is rural. But so we have to find solutions that work for the whole territory. And we have to probably think them anew. If, like Einstein said, you can't think of issues the same way and expect for different results. And we have to understand that some of the expressions that we use probably are not accurate and certainly are not useful from a policy point of view. So having bikes and shared micromobility shoved into the first mile, last mile shelf is probably not accurate for many of the trips that people have to do. I mean, for those who don't know, even in metropolitan areas, commuting trips account for 20% or less of the trips. What about the 80%? They're probably less than a mile. So the first last mile thing is probably not very helpful. Another point we'd like to make is that we need more than to promote the shift to sustainable mobility. The true policy challenge and societal challenge that we face is accelerating the shift to sustainable mobility and achieving a shift that is of such a scale of speed as never seen before. So for that, we need to increase the capacity of sustainable mobility. And obviously that means public transport, but it also means increasing the capacity of our infrastructure for active mobility. So for walking and for cycling as well, that is also about increasing capacity. It's not about buying vehicles only necessarily. It's also about increasing the quality and the safety, the level of service of our infrastructure for walking and cycling. And it also means, very importantly here for shared micromobility, improving the services. Now, we as local and regional authorities, we are aware that we are not the best positioned to launch these services. In many cases, there are several cities where we have shared cycling schemes working, but we need to grow them, and they, in the public way, is not the only way to go. Which means, third idea, that we need to basically, how we see the role of local and regional authorities today is as we have to cater for or curate or support the emergence of an alternative menu of mobility services. That includes car sharing, but also bike sharing, e-scooter sharing, carpooling, and several other solutions. And the more diversified this alternative menu is, the more versatile it will become. And the more versatile it becomes, the more able it will be to address the different needs that people have throughout the day, the week, the year, in terms of mobility needs, the more reliable it will become. The fourth idea is that to provide this, we really have to acknowledge that this implies supporting shared mobility and shared micromobility to deploy in lower density areas, to support off-peak services, and thus to have them support their operation in areas where they may find to be business challenging, let's say. And so we have to, as public authorities, to also find a way to, the same thing as we do for public transport, to find a way to provide for compensation for operation in these areas. Our main concern is that, number one, this compensation is additional and complementary to the compensations that we already have to provide to public transport, so it doesn't cannibalize on it. But on the other hand, that we talk about things for what they really are. These are not subsidies. These are compensatory payments that make the operation of these services viable, desirable services. Subsidies is what we're giving to cars through fossil fuel subsidies and through subsidies to the purchase of cars. Those are subsidies. These are not subsidies, are compensation for a desirable service. And finally, the fifth idea is that we really need to value shared micromobility. I'm preaching to the converted here. What I would like to point out is that we see, with this shift, we really want to achieve a strategic long-term change. And there's beyond providing the service, there's something that shared micromobility is providing, which is the taste of innovation. If you go in through innovation research, you will see that a critical step in the adoption of new things, new values, new practices is that people at some point need to taste. And shared micromobility is providing that. And so I remember when I was growing up, probably not many of you are as old as I am, but I remember, I mean, look, 30 years ago, the rite of passage into adulthood was getting a driver's license. So you could get, you know, mobility independent, your autonomy as a young man or woman. And I think that what we see today is shared micromobility has provided this motorized autonomy solution to many people. And so that's a deep strategic effect that shared micromobility has. And finally, one last comment. I find it really interesting that the European Commission is, and you know, many people in the Brussels bubble are very committed to improving business innovation and startups and this and that, you know, the EU, the European economy has to remain competitive and innovate. And we see most of the money going for research and for business innovation and technology development, going to areas in automotive industry, which are the least innovative in business terms. The hot stuff of innovation, the new ideas, the people stepping forward in new services, you see them here in shared micromobility. And I'm not being nice, I mean, it's a fact. So that's one more strategic reason that we feel makes shared micromobility important. It's the gateway to the mobility economy of the future. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pedro. I think the driver's license example is the next really good one, where we can really see a shift in the paradigm of mobility right now. We have a question that I don't think we can all answer right now, but would be good to keep in mind. That is, do we think that a shared mobility or a bike share scheme can launch and run without ongoing financial support from the public authorities? The question is coming from Mark Strong, and I think, Pedro, you hinted already at some answer, and I think we're going to take that also during the other presentation. But if you want to answer shortly on that one, you're more than welcome.
I mean, maybe it can. I don't know. The point is that I think we are past, I mean, look at what's happening with the climate crisis. We are past the mark of maybe trying, maybe seeing if it works. I mean, we know stuff that works. We have to fund it massively and launch it massively. So maybe the answer is yes. I wouldn't say no. What do I know? But I think that the point here being that we really need to launch and upscale massively, and that definitely requires public support. And public money is but one element of public support. There's a lot of support that we've over the past century we've given to the automotive industry. We just get to do it to shared micromobility now. In terms of infrastructure, we gave it to the cars. Well, let's change it in terms of subsidies. We gave it to the automotive industry. We're still giving it. Let's shift. Let's shift the public investment towards what we all know is necessary.
Thank you, Pedro. If you have more questions for Pedro, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. We'll have a short Q&A session at the end. We're going to move on to our next speaker, Nadia Goupil from 15. Nadia, please take the stage.
Yes, thanks, Marion. So I think I had a presentation. Yeah, perfect, thanks. So today I'm going to share with you an experimentation that's called Vélo Modalis, which is an experimentation in the southwest of France. And it's basically a train plus bike system along a railway axis of about 100 kilometers long between Royan and Angoulême, and which has 8 train stations. And so basically we put one bike station at each train station, following kind of the model that you maybe know of OVFIT or Blue Bike, but with a little twist. Because as you can see on the slide, there are some pink cities. Just the previous slide, yeah, there are some pink cities. So Royan, Cognac, and Angoulême, and there are some black cities, so the other ones. And the difference between them is that the pink ones are a bit more dense. So there are cities of more than 20,000 inhabitants, so not huge cities, small to mid-sized ones. But we thought that they were dense enough so that we could put some bike stations also in the city center and not only in the train. So the idea is to increase the bike rotation. So for instance, if I work in Royan and my job is next to a bike station that is in the city center, I can just let my bike there and somebody else can use it in the meantime during the day, and I can take another one and go back to the train station. So in this way, we increase the number of times that a bike can be used and the number of users who can benefit from the service. And in the black cities, they are very much smaller. So we just added one bike station and you can only do a loop. And so on all of these cities, you can keep your bike for the whole day. So we were really targeting commuters who were living far away from their job. And it is basically the users that we have today is people who live maybe 50, 70 kilometers away. And we wanted to offer them a solution so that they could take the train and take the bike for the last kilometers. And so, yeah, you can, of course, in all this railway line, have a bike for a few minutes from a station to another, or keep it the whole day with the same app, with the same bikes, with the same tariff, etc. So today we've had this experimentation for about 10 months. So we have some preliminary results. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so we see that there's a nice ramp up of the number of trips. So these are the trips per week, and also the user trend is following that. So we're very much expecting what is going to be for this spring and this summer. And we are also following some qualitative KPIs. So if we look at the model shift, we have about 30% of our subscribers who were using their car before we arrived. So that's a nice achievement. We're happy about it. Another KPIs that we were looking at was where did the people came from? And we actually found out that the majority of our subscribers, they live in towns of less than 3,000 inhabitants. And I think this is something really nice, because it's for bike sharing, it's always difficult to see how deep can we go in the territory, can we go in really not dense areas. And I think with this system, we found an equilibrium that makes sense for these towns, because it wouldn't make sense for them to have a separate system from all the other cities, who would also make sense for the operators, because we are also doing all the operations, and we are kind of mutualizing everything. And so it allows us to put these stations even in these very small towns, and to have people actually using it. Then we were also looking on existing systems. So that was kind of tricky, because there were one of these cities that I showed you who already had a bike sharing service, and all the others basically they had a long-term leasing rental, which is a system where you can rent your bike for a few months. So not exactly the same, but still a location service. And we were wondering, is our service going to cannibalize them or not? And the answer is absolutely not. All the KPIs are green, including for these other services, even in the same city. So it kind of aligns with the idea that if you put more bike somewhere, you're going to have more bike eventually. And last KPI is the bicycle on the train. It's something that is a figure that is very much looked at by the region. Because when you have too many people taking their bike on the train, well, first of all, there's limited amount of space, and also it creates conflicts of usage. And actually, yeah, a lot of our users decided to switch from taking their bike in their train and to having, and they prefer to have a bike waiting for them at the end of their train journey. they found it was more comfortable. So we are also happy about this KPI. So yeah, that was it for it. Don't hesitate if you have a question, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Nadia. About the territory inclusion, it seems to be quite a big success for your operation. Was it one of the objectives of the public authority from the beginning, or is it something that came along the project?
No, it was really something from the beginning, and it's why we wanted to include all of these cities and not only the more dense, like the pink ones, but including the very small ones that had a train stop. And even now we are considering expanding it not only to train stations, but also to even smaller cities who only have bus stops, like long distance buses. So it was something that we wanted to do it from the beginning, but we were not sure whether there would be some usage or not. And we see that there is.
Thank you very much, Nadia. Great experiment and great results. If anyone has more questions, please ask them in the chat and we'll take them at the end in the Q&A session. We're going to move on to our next speaker, who's going to, so Nick Brown from Géologique. Nick, please take it away.
Thanks, Marion. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Nick Brown. I'm the UK CEO of Géologique. We're one of the largest third-party bike share scheme operators in the UK and Europe. I'll be talking to you about how we brought the Veligo model, which is a public bike share subscription model, from Paris to Glasgow. Sounds a bit like an ABBA song, I think. So this new type of bike share scheme gets me really excited. I could certainly talk a lot longer than 5 minutes. I've put my email address on the slide, so if you do have any questions, feel free to drop me a line or, of course, ask questions in the comments or at the end of this webinar. So on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit about Veligo, what it is and what it is not. First of all, it's not Velib. It's a scheme we also work on. Velib is the Dott bike share scheme, which only has 18,000 bikes. Veligo has actually got 20,000 bicycles. They're available for hire on a public bike subscription model scheme, which Géologique helped develop at policy stage, and we've delivered it in partnership with Île-de-France, Transdev and La Poste. It is a scheme made up of a mix of standard bicycles, hybrid bicycles, cargo and family bicycles. We can also fit child seats to the bicycles. So it really is accessible to a broad user base. And starting from €40 a month, you'll get a fully maintained electric bicycle that you'll use for a 3 to 6 month period. And the idea is that during that period, you'll start picking up the habits of using a bicycle to become a bicycle user. And at the end of the period, the bicycle is given back to a new user, and you're then incentivized through various incentive schemes offered by the industry to buy your own electric bicycle. And with that other bicycle going back into the pool of bikes, we can effectively turn 20,000 bikes into 80,000 new cyclists every year. The benefits of this type of scheme is that you can really drive modal shift. We're seeing 40% modal shift from this subscription model. In France, we're seeing that's significantly higher than the Dott schemes can deliver. One of the huge benefits of this is the startup costs are significantly less. There's no infrastructure required. There's no electrification, no consents, no civil works. With the bikes being not on the streets, there's less vandalism risk, less theft risk. And with the users paying not an insubstantial amount, €40 a month, they've got a sense of ownership for that bike, so they look after it more. And this scheme can also it's very complementary to the Dott bike share schemes as well. Another benefit of this type of scheme, it benefits the cycle industry. It doesn't act against it. We're not competing against the bicycle industry. In fact, we're creating new cyclists that will go out and buy new bicycles. And then in the spirit of what this session is about, this is not just for large cities. This subscription model can be replicated on a much smaller scale in the regions, the outer boroughs and smaller towns and cities. We've already got this type of scheme operating across France with 100 assets or less. And we've now had the opportunity to bring the subscription model to the UK, which brings us on to the next slide. Thank you. So we've taken the Veligo model and we've launched a pilot scheme in it's the UK's first public bike share subscription scheme in Glasgow, funded by Transport for Scotland. This is what Velogic's developed and launched Switch Up with our social enterprise partner, Bike for Good, and Velogic are the operator of the scheme. It's launched with just 300 bicycles. That seems to be the sweet spot of bicycles in a lot of the UK tenders that we're seeing at the moment. It costs significantly less than £1 million to launch and operate for 2 years. We've seen 20% of the user base coming from the low income disadvantaged groups, which is something that's very important to our social enterprise partner. And despite it being a pilot, and we're still only just the first year into it, we're getting great levels of customer satisfaction. The users are really happy with this type of service, and we've already seen some great levels of new sign-ups. Got some learnings from the pilot still. Unsurprisingly, e-bikes by far the most popular types of bikes on the scheme. We've also got mechanical bikes and cargo bikes. The family type cargo bike is also very popular for users of the scheme. Sometimes we tend to forget in bike share, but the end cyclist, the user, is the customer. So when we launch these types of scheme, we're trying to get more sign-ups. We've really got to use those B2C style marketing and sales campaigns to drive your sign-ups and awareness of the scheme. And so lastly, and for many of you know me, this is one of my pet topics, not just for subscription, but across bike share. And I hope the consultants are listening here. High active bike availability is not a measure of success, especially on subscription. High bike availability on a subscription model would just mean I've got 300 bikes sat in a depot waiting to be hired. The real measure of success is actually how many active subscribers you get and retain. And that means more cycle users, it means more scheme revenue, it means more money back into the public purse, and it means more modal shift to cycling as a viable and sustainable form of transport, which is what we all want to achieve. And it can be achieved through public bike subscription in the cities, the towns, the outer boroughs, and the regions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. We have a question from the audience. I'm going to make it a bit broader. How important is the level of infrastructure, to launch that type of system? So how do you feel about that? Because you saw the difference between Paris and Glasgow and different scales.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously with it being a individual user sign-ups, they're not taking the bike from a docking station. They're actually, the bike's delivered to their house or the place of work, or they can collect from small collection centres. So your investment in your infrastructure is significantly less, other than having collection points made available to cities.
I think they mean a bit the cycling infrastructure that you have in a city. So if there's bike parks, for example, bike parkings or cycle lanes and things like that.
Well, I think we all know that that's just one of the factors that we need to encourage cycling anywhere. So of course, the more cycling type infrastructure, segregated lanes we have, the more people we will have using bicycles in general. But this is just a new way of getting people access to a bicycle, and especially electric bicycles that might not normally have access to it, and especially for such the cheaper rate.
Thank you, Nick. We're going to move on to our next speaker, John Ramirez from Next Bike.
Hi. Perfect. Thank you, Mariano. Hi, everyone. So, well, a pleasure to be here. For the ones that don't know Next Bike, I mean, we are the bike share European leader, by far the biggest, let's say, company in number of bikes and cities that we have in Europe. And one of our core experiences is working with regional bike sharing schemes. So one of the cases that I'm going to present is one that's been running for more than 10 years. And we have learned a lot of things during these 10 years. And the other scheme I'm going to present is one that we recently started. It started last year in October. And we also learned a lot. And the experience that we have had with this scheme is very unusual. So basically, this scheme is covering the metropolitan area of Bilbao. It's covered in total 9 municipalities. It has full e-bike scheme, including also 9 tricycles. And the 9 tricycles are located in every municipality, and the way they're rented is now being under testing. So we're testing a similar model as Nick was proposing. So where the bike can be delivered for the person and they can use it for long-term rental, they say 1 day, a week. So we're like trying. The bike can also be put outside as a bike share and be rented with a smart card without the need of having a smartphone, which is quite interesting. And I think what we learned in this case, one of the big, let's say, learnings is when you have a system that is covering and is, let's say, thought as a public transit, it means that it's integrated. It means that it's very affordable for people. You get to have a lot of usage. So in this municipality, municipalities that have 4,000 inhabitants, very small. Some of them don't have many bus stops, have maybe a couple or just 1 train station, but people at the end don't have other alternatives to move within the city. And in these municipalities, the infrastructure allows them to be integrated. So there's a lot of communication between municipalities. We have over 20% of rentals that are going from one municipality to the other, which is interesting. And we have over 20,000 subscribers in less than a month. So it's a very high number of, let's say, active subscribers. And the rentals are quite high. So we reached in, let's say, last year, I think in December, we reached peaks of 10 up to 15 rentals per bike per day, which is massive for this type of service because the areas or the municipality that is covering, let's say in terms of density, quite low. But I think there was a big investment or bet from the region and also from the municipalities to complement their transport and also integrate this as part of the infrastructure planning and to connect all the cities to allow people not only to move by car from one municipality to the other, which is the main mode of transport for some of these municipalities, but also add the bike as part of it. Something very interesting we developed with them was to create a tariff that is changing depending on your behavior. So very similar to the model that we have with public transit. The more you ride, the less you pay. So that's basically the logic. So for power users that rent more than 30, let's say, times a month, they are getting paid for the next month. They're paying less for the first 30 minutes. For everyone that is here who have ever used an e-bike, I think the tariff of 15 cents for 30 minutes is really affordable. And I think just to answer the first question that was in line with the public transit, like if a bike sharing scheme can be operated privately without any funds, I would ask the question back, like, can a bus lane be operated in a suburb without any funding and grant that is a reliable service and also accessible for everyone? And I think the answer will be no. So if we really want to consider bike sharing as part of the public transit, to grant these type of tariffs, to grant these type of services, high level of availability and also very affordable service for everyone, is something that cannot be sustainable financially alone because it cannot be privately driven. It needs to be from the public because it's basically just part of the public transit. Instead of taking the bus or the tram, you're just taking a bike. So it's part of the combo, as we call it. So this one is quite interesting. We're just learning. I mean, the service is operating for less than, let's say, 6 months. And we were never expecting this usage. I think nor the cities nor us. So we were happily surprised for the usage, for how people took the scheme. Because we also run the scheme in Bilbao, which has a lot of usage as well. But here we're operating mainly in municipalities that have way less density. And it was a great surprise, I think, to be how the scheme was taken favorably in general. So if you don't mind, we can go to the next slide, which is a very interesting case, very old one. So it started, let's say, relatively small and has been growing over the last 10 years. And what we have learned from this scheme is basically, I mean, in Germany, this is relatively common, but the bikes are already part of the public transit. So the whole model is basically offering you, including your public transport ticket, the bikes as part of the service. So the branding, the mass integration, the tariff integration, everything is included as once. And that's how we've seen that it's possible to offer bike sharing, let's say, in 24 municipalities You see the amount of stations that we have, which is quite significant. It's more than 400. And let's say how the bikes are distributed in the area that grants basically different service availability for those areas. So we have cities that have like 2,000 inhabitants, 3,000 inhabitants. I think the different way to allow that these different municipalities can have a services integrated with other municipalities that are around. The same way it works with the bus, the same way it works with the tram. At the end, if you have one ticket that is integrating the whole services, then you can manage as a whole regional scheme, not only the bikes alone, but also the public transit. And I think we have a big challenge in rural transport, where we have high, let's say, usage of a car, and they're less offer in general for moving around. And the public transit cannot do it alone. It's very expensive. Public transit is unflexible. And this is where micromobility really makes the difference. So I saw the question, but we also need to support private usage of micromobility. And I couldn't agree more, yes. But in order for public transit to compete in this area, they need the flexibility that public, like micromobility, is offering. And I think like teaming up together public transport operators with the micromobility operators is the way basically to grant these type of services. So I think that's it from my side for the presentation. I don't know if you have any question or something to comment.
Thank you, John. I think you did a really good job in answering also our first question that we have to the panel. We're going to have to move on to the next presentation. However, if you have questions for John, please send us your questions. We're going to try to take them during the Q&A session. We're just trying to stick to our timing so we have enough time for the Q&A session. Thank you, John. We're now going to welcome Maggy Gerbeaux from Dott. Maggy, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Marion. First, a few words about Dott. Dott was founded in 2019 to complete the public transportation offer with local micromobility solution designed for European cities. We deploy e-bikes and e-scooters in many cities in Europe. And our in-house employment model and pro-regulation approach create a safe, accessible, and sustainable service for everyone. Now, I'm going to talk about one case in particular in France, the metropole of Grenoble. So the next slide, please. First, I will share with you some data about this territory. Our service is available in 366,000 inhabitants in 17 municipalities and covering 83 square kilometers. We have built with the Metropolis a strong partnership and more than 600 mandatory parking spots. There is no free floating since the day one in the Metropolis of Grenoble. We have an authorization to deploy 2,100 e-bikes and 2,100 e-scooters. In 2020, we had more than 100,000 users, more than 2 million of trips, and 5 million kilometers ridden. According to a study done with our user last year for Grenoble Alpes Métropole, I will share with you some numbers, some data. We have 60% of Dott trips are made for commuting. 43 of Dott users live in the metro region outside of the center of Grenoble. And 54 of Dott users declare to reduce their car usage with our service. On the sustainability side, we still work to reduce our carbon footprint with green operation particularly. And over the year, we reduced our CO2 emission in Grenoble by 16%. We also built some partnership with other actors of the sector locally. For example, ECOV for the commute car sharing, or Better Way, who facilitate access to mobility and employees. About the usage, we still have a difference between the usage for e-bike and e-scooters. More than 2 rides per bike per day for e-bikes and more than 4 rides per e-scooter per day. So we can see that scooters are more used and contribute significantly to reducing car use in the metropolis. And this multimodal offer helps to achieve the objective of reducing carbon mode in this area. Service integrating e-scooter and e-bikes helps positive unit economic also. Next slide, please. With this overview, you can see that since 2 years, we managed to build a profitable regional e-bike share scheme. We create high-quality local job by conducting all of our operation. This allows us to maintain a total control over when, where, and how our service is delivered. And how we have done this, we establish a well-performing regional scheme with no public subsidies, because we have strong profit margin in the city center, and it helps to cover the costs in the periphery of the metropolis. But we can still improve and increase the usage rate by making the service more affordable. And this is the challenge. We have to serve area of low demand with high variable cost and low profitability as well. As you can see in this slide, Grenoble is only the 14th in the ranking of the CIE benchmarking study. And as you can see, all of the top 10 cities have a strong public scheme with subsidized ride. So in conclusion, our ambition for an area like Grenoble, Alpes Métropole, is to reach to the top 5 UE position, and we need to compete with a new model of financial compensation, like Pedro said at the beginning. And this is one of the main challenges if we want to think at a regional level and not only on the city center of the cities.
Thank you, Maggie. Maybe one question about this operation and also some of the other ones we just saw is, how is it organized on the public side? So basically, how can the cities go together? Is it made on the regional level, on the commune level, métropole? So how is it organized in your case?
In France, it's not always the same, not always the same, but for Grenoble Métropole, this is organized by the Transport Authority, and at Grenoble, the Transport Authority is Grenoble Métropole with the 17 cities, and they have made a tender to choose 1 or 2 operators, and they choose 1 operator for the two transport, e-bikes and e-scooter. But they choose only for 3 years, so there will be a new tender with maybe new rules and maybe a model with financial compensation.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Maggie. We're going to move on to our next speaker, Mariano Perez. Mariano, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Marion, and congrats for your time management. I hope not to spoil it. Indeed, we all have a lot of experience in operating bike sharing services in cities of different sizes, but in my opinion, the design, implementation, and operation of bike sharing services in metropolitan areas are still a challenge for the sector. Thus, what I would like to share are just a few ideas that I think are important for our experience in operating metropolitan services, because Inurba operates almost 20,000 bikes all over the world, and some of them in metropolitan services. For example, we operate Helsinki and Espoo service, that is a total integrated service, and level 2.0 in Tricity metropolitan area in Poland. So next slide, please. It is obvious that the coverage area of such a service is not the whole metropolitan area, but in our opinion, it's necessary to analyze very carefully in detail which areas should be served by a bike sharing service. In our case, we tend to identify 3 types of areas. Areas of a high population density and mixed land use, with a big capacity to generate trips. that is the cities of within this metropolitan region. In large cities, more trips are internal, but in small cities, there are many trips to other cities, but most of them made by bike combined with public transportation. It should be taken into account the same process. Close to this denser area normally exists low density residential area where this land use predominates. These areas generate very few trips, typically in the morning and evening peak hours. So could be or should be more efficient to maybe serve these kind of areas with a long-term rental service. So this is another topic to take into account. And of course, rural areas without any trip generation capacity. So anyway, once the decision has been made, whether to serve the metropolitan region with a bike sharing service or to combine it with this long-term rental service, in our experience, the following key topics should be taken into account. The metropolitan, first one is that the metropolitan service must be single service. That is only one registration process to be able to take a bicycle in any city, one web, one application, one brand. That is so cities could transfer the capability of contracting these services to the metropolitan authority. It's also essential that the new service was integrated with public transportation to serve those areas where there are many trips combined with public transportation. So one person can ride a bike in his or her city until bus stop, a train station, take the public transportation, go to the other city where maybe he or she work, and still use the same service in the other city. So I think it's crucial. Normally, we recommend for extensions such as metropolitan area, 100% of the fleet electric, or at least 75%. And the last one is that the purchase, the investment of this metropolitan system is more or less the same of a urban one. But the big difference is the operational cost due to the complexity of maintenance and rebalancing tasks. We think that with a good design, we can reduce this cost significantly, because we can style the service in a way that we cannot, or we must not do this maintenance, this intense maintenance and redistribution operation. Next slide, please. I would like to share with you the experience with our metropolitan project in Poland, Level 2.0. You can see the figures of the service, and there we have learned some lessons that I would like to share with you. On the main obstacle, I would like to highlight two, because when deploying in several municipalities, obtaining permits can be a major barrier to deployment. The help of the metropolitan authority is crucial in that task, because normally it's one of the stoppers of the rollout. And the second one is defining individual KPIs for each city makes the operation very expensive. And at the end of the day, the important thing is that when a user arrives at the station, he or she has a bike or a place to live it. For example, within the metropolitan area, we have cities with a fleet of 20 bikes, 5 mechanical. Then 2 trips can reduce the available fleet by 40%, but this may not affect the user. And in my opinion, as a model of public transport, bike sharing should receive public support, public subsidies. Is this a cost for cities? No, it's an investment because the payback period for such a system is about 6 years due to the large energy savings and environmental savings and so on. So, but I'd like to highlight that to achieve this, to make this service feasible, it is crucial to carry out a very, very good economic study that includes, for example, the study option. Should we use charging stations? Should we do battery swapping? Maybe both. So it's linked to the contract term. So I think we must take into account all the aspects. Are we going to use long-term rental for low-density areas? And so I hope that all this quick overview of our experience help the sector to advance in this kind of service.
Thank you, Mariano. I think I want to move on to the Q&A and start the question that I would like most of the panelists to answer to with you, because it's very much linked to what you just explained. So Ken Barker is asking in the chat, what are the lessons of loss or vandalism to shared bikes causing the service to be suspended or abandoned? So I think if you can answer to that, to the lessons, and also if you can put it in context, in more generally what it means. As you said, it's an investment for cities, the bike share, so I think it would be good to also take it a bit broader.
Sorry, I had a problem with the beginning of the question. I have understood.
What are the lessons of loss or vandalism to shared bikes?
Okay. Theft and vandalism are costs within the bike sharing services in a urban one or metropolitan system. So from our point of view, the vandalism and theft are linked with all the stage of the system and all the aspects. For example, we can plan trying to avoid theft and vandalism with the station location. And so we of course it's linked to the technology. There are technologies safer than others. You can use a station-based technology or maybe a fourth generation technology that could be less safe but cheaper. So it's an economical decision at the end of the day. But of course, theft and vandalism exist in everywhere. It's a cost. Or the operator include this cost in our business plan, and even although this cost, the bike sharing services are an investment, not a cost. So I think that all the bike sharing service has a level of vandalism between maybe 2 to 5%. It's normal. We are not. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to joke a little bit, but at the end of the day, somebody is taking a bike, not a bomb. So it's okay. It could be more safe, but it's at the end of the day, it's only a cost.
Thank you, Mariano. We have quite a lot of questions that are directly linked to your presentation, so you also can see them in the Q&A, panelists, and you can also type your answer. I saw some of you did already, so don't hesitate to do it. I would like to ask the panel to see if you want to also answer this question, or otherwise I would like to move the conversation on the authorities that can organize those bike sharing systems on the regional level, because we have a question about also the fact that asking if it's common for local councils and private businesses to use bike share for their mobility needs, and maybe to use bike share on a wider scale. I think, Nadia, your example was with train stations. Is it something that you have seen in Europe, that companies, maybe public transport companies or other companies, are organizing bike sharing systems for mobility needs?
So yeah, I mean, there are some private companies, but honestly, it's more likely to be local governments who would organize the bike sharing system. I was not sure actually if the question was for the person to use the bike sharing system for their personal needs. And if that was the question, the answer is yes. We have lots of clients who, like cities who the administration or the elected officials, they do use the public bike sharing service that we install for their own use, and so they have their own feedback. So that's always great to have them engaged in the service.
Thank you, Nadia. I think we're coming towards the end of the webinar. We still have quite a few questions in the Q&A, so again, don't hesitate to add your answers directly, panelists, in the Q&A box. Maybe you want to give a few last words for the end of this webinar, still in the same context of the regional bike sharing system, because we talked mainly about territory inclusion in different different scales and different type of fleet also, and also on how to integrate in the structure planning from the beginning. Those were the highlights. Any other point you want us and the attendees to remember? Yes, Pedro?
Yes, sorry if I'm repeating myself. I think that it's very important that we all explain to all sorts of policymakers that innovation is also about service design. It's also about business model. It's not just about coming with a more recent electronically whatever vehicle or AV or whatever. The real innovation we need is in the way to do things, and the alternatives that we propose to get out of this carbon-intensive mobility system. And that's the innovation we need in service design, in business models. I should say I'm fascinated by the examples I heard from Nadia and Nick and John and Maggy. I think they show the way, you know, and also from Mariano, they really show the way. It's the service design. It's multiplying the type of offers that we have, not just the number of vehicles, the type of offers and service. Yeah.
Thank you, Pedro. I think it will be the last word of our webinar. Thank you all for your presentation, and thank you everyone for attending. Do not hesitate to reach out to the CIE or directly to our panel and myself for questions. I would be happy to take them. And see you soon on the next session of CIE webinars. And do not hesitate to reach out to us with also topics you would like us to cover in our next sessions. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you soon.